Dominic Harwell stepped out of his car and took exactly one breath before the cameras found him. They always found him. It had been that way since the collapse, when the story of his failure ran on 3 different networks in the same week. Now that he had rebuilt, they followed him differently. Less like wolves, and more like people who wanted to stand close enough to something successful that some of it might transfer. He straightened his jacket and looked at the entrance to the Belmore Hotel. The fountain out front was lit blue and white. Valet in black stood at attention. Somewhere inside, a string quartet was playing something expensive and sentimental. Somewhere inside, Vivian Cross was about to become someone else's wife. They had been together for 4 years. He had proposed on a Tuesday morning over coffee in her kitchen, and she had said yes with both hands pressed to her face. Laughing, he thought he had known her completely. Then his company hit a wall, and the investors started calling, and the board started asking questions he couldn't answer fast enough. And one night she sat across from him at dinner and said the thing she said. The sentence was calm and direct, and it ended everything. "I've been patient, Dominic, but I didn't sign up to rebuild from scratch." He had thought about that sentence a great deal since then, mostly in the early hours, when the mind goes to the places it knows it shouldn't. He was not here tonight because he still wanted her. He had been honest with himself about that for months. He was here because she had sent an invitation, her handwriting on cream paper, slightly formal, which meant she wanted him to come, and because some part of him needed to walk into that room on his own 2 feet and let her see what she had been so willing to walk away from. That was the plan. It was not a good plan, but it was the only one he had. He was approaching the entrance when he noticed her. She was sitting on the low concrete wall that ran along the edge of the hotel's side entrance, just past the reach of the main lights. Not hiding, exactly, but tucked at the edge of things the way people get when they've learned not to take up too much space. She was wearing a blue dress that had seen better days, the hem uneven, the fabric worn thin at the shoulder seam. Her hair was loose and slightly damp, as if she'd come in from the cold without time to dry it properly. She held a paper coffee cup with both hands, the kind you get from a cart on the sidewalk when it's the only thing open. She wasn't asking anyone for anything. She was just sitting there watching the guests arrive in their cars in their silk and their easy smiles, with an expression that was neither bitter nor envious. Just watching. The way someone watches something that no longer has anything to do with them. A hotel employee in a fitted vest walked toward her with the particular stride of someone who had been told to handle things quietly. "Ma'am, this area is reserved for guests of the event. I'll need to ask you to move along." She looked up at him. She didn't flinch, didn't make herself small. "I'm not in anyone's way," she said. Her voice was even. "We have guests arriving. This entrance needs to remain clear. I'm not blocking the entrance, ma'am. Hey." Dominic didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The employee turned around. "She's with me," Dominic said. There was a pause. The employee looked from Dominic to the woman and back again. Then he gave a small nod and walked away. The woman on the wall looked up at Dominic with an expression that was equal parts wary and confused. "I'm not with you," she said. "I've never met you." "No," he agreed, but he didn't know that. She studied him not the way people usually did, calculating his wealth or his relevance, but more carefully, like she was trying to work out what he wanted. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." He didn't push it. He sat down on the wall a few feet away from her, which was probably not what she expected. He watched the valets moving cars out the fountain. The music from inside drifted through the hotel's glass doors every time they opened. After a moment, she said, "You're going in there?" "Eventually." "Then, why are you out here?" He almost smiled. "Same reason as you, probably. Stalling." She looked at the hotel entrance. I just needed somewhere to sit for a while." "When did you last eat?" The question came out before he'd decided to ask it. She turned to look at him, and in the better light from the hotel, he could see her more clearly. She was maybe 32, 33. There was a tiredness in her face that went deeper than one bad night. But her eyes were alert, dark, and very direct, and there was a small crescent-shaped scar at the edge of her left brow, barely visible, the kind of thing you'd only notice up close, that gave her face a quality he couldn't quite name. Character, maybe. A history. I'm not going to answer that, she said. Fair enough. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the small wrapped packet from the hotel gift bag he'd been handed on arrival. A shortbread cookie with the event's monogram pressed into it. He set it on the wall between them without comment. She looked at it. She looked at him. I'm not a charity case, she said. I know. It's monogrammed shortbread from a wedding gift bag. I was going to throw it away. A pause. Then she picked it up. He turned back toward the fountain. Nora, she said. He repeated it quietly. Not quite a question. Not quite a statement. Nora, Vane, she added, as if the last name was something she still had to remind herself to say. Dominic Harwell, he said. She gave a short, involuntary laugh. He turned to look at her. Sorry, she said. I know who you are. She was looking at the hotel entrance. My father, he was in commercial real estate. He thought you were going to change how the whole industry worked. She paused. Before everything, he agreed. Before everything, he agreed. They sat quietly for a moment. He passed away, she said, not looking at him. 8 months ago. He was sick for a while before that. I came back to take care of him. And then after, I didn't. There wasn't much left to go back to. She said it the way people say true things that they've stopped being surprised by. Just the facts. The apartment I'd been renting was sublet. The job had been filled. I've been sorting it out. Where have you been staying? Another pause. Different places. A friend's floor for a while. A shelter last month. She said the word plainly, without apology. He nodded once. He didn't offer sympathy that would have made her feel smaller. He just nodded. So what are you doing here? She asked. At this specific hotel on this specific night? He was quiet for a moment. My ex is getting married inside. Nora turned to look at him. And you came? She invited me. And you accepted? He thought about it. I think I wanted her to see that I was fine. Nora was quiet. Are you fine? I'm getting there. She looked at the entrance again. That seems like a complicated reason to put on a good suit. He almost laughed. It is. But here I am. She handed him back the wrapper from the shortbread without looking at him. He took it. Another car pulled up to the valet. Come inside with me, he said. She turned. What? As my guest. Come inside. The expression on her face was something he hadn't seen directed at him in a while. Just pure, uncomplicated disbelief. You can't be serious. I'm almost always serious. It's one of my better qualities. She looked down at her dress, then at the people passing through the entrance in floor-length gowns and fitted tuxedos. I look like this. He looked at her for a moment. You look like someone who's had a hard few months and is handling it with more dignity than most people handle a bad Tuesday. She stared at him. He stood and held out his arm. You're actually serious, she said. Yes. She stood slowly. She was a few inches shorter than him. She looked at his arm, then at the hotel doors, then back at him with the expression of someone making a decision they're not completely sure about. They're going to stare, she said. People always stare. It means they noticed you. She took his arm. They walked in together. The lobby of the Belmore was the kind of space designed to make people feel that beauty was a thing you could purchase if you had enough of it. Chandeliers the size of cars. Marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Flower arrangements taller than some of the guests. The room noticed Dominic first. It always did. He was the kind of person rooms noticed. And then the room noticed who was beside him. Nora kept her head up. He could feel her hand tighten slightly on his arm, but her face stayed neutral, her spine straight, her eyes moving through the crowd with a steadiness that he suspected cost her something. The guests parted slowly, the way water goes around a stone. The whispers were not subtle. As they moved deeper into the room, Dominic leaned down and said quietly, Don't look at them. Yes, what they're saying is more about them than about you. Yes, she was quiet, but she kept walking. Vivian Cross, soon to be Vivian Parrish, was standing near the floral arch at the far end of the reception hall. She was beautiful. She had always been beautiful. The gown was ivory, perfectly cut, the kind of dress that required months of fittings. She was talking to someone from the groom's family, and then she saw who was beside him. Something moved across Vivian's face. It came and went quickly, but Dominic had known her for 4 years, and he recognized it. It wasn't quite pain. It was something more like the sudden awareness. Sudden awareness that she had miscalculated something. He guided Nora toward the tables near the front, and they sat. A woman in a silver dress appeared almost immediately, a woman who had always treated social events as competitive sport. Dominic. She kissed the air near his sport. Dominic. She kissed the air near his cheek. Then she looked at Nora with the particular look that certain women reserve for other women they've decided not to respect. "And who is this?" "This is Nora Vane," Dominic said. "Nora," the aunt said, with a smile that didn't go anywhere above the mouth. "What a lovely dress." Nora looked at her steadily. "Thank you. Yours is beautiful." The aunt waited for something else. When nothing came, she excused herself. Nora reached for the water glass in front of her. Her hand was perfectly steady. "You've done this before," Dominic said. "Done what?" "Stayed calm when someone was being condescending." She set the glass down. "I spent 3 years working at a nonprofit where my supervisor took credit for everything I produced and talked over me in every meeting. You learn." She paused. "Or you don't, and you get very tired." He watched her face. "What kind of nonprofit?" She looked at him as if she was deciding how much to say. "Housing advocacy. I wrote policy briefs, drafted proposals, did community outreach. Mostly in neighborhoods that had been written off by every city department that was supposed to care about them." She looked at the flower arrangements across the room. "I liked it, the work, I mean. Not the supervisor. Why did you leave?" "I didn't exactly. The funding dried up. The whole program was cut." She was quiet a moment. "It's a common story." The ceremony began not long after. A priest spoke about love and choosing people not for their convenience but for their character. Dominic sat very still. He watched Vivian at the altar beside Jeffrey Parrish. Jeffrey was wealthy, certain of himself, the kind of man who had never needed to rebuild anything because nothing had ever seriously fallen apart. He held Vivian's hand as if she were a decision he felt very good about. Dominic felt Nora looking at him. She asked, her voice low enough for only him to hear. 4 years. She considered that. What happened? He thought about how to say it honestly. "I had a bad year." She decided she didn't want to stay for it. Nora was quiet. Then, "You don't sound angry." "I was, for a while." He watched the altar. "Then I got tired of the anger. It was heavier than the grief." She turned back to the ceremony. After a moment she said softly, "I know what you mean." He turned to look at her. She was watching the couple at the altar with an expression that was both very present and very far away. "I'm sorry about your father," he said. She blinked. Then she nodded once, very slightly, and said nothing, which told him more than whatever she might have said. The reception that followed was louder, more crowded, and significantly more perfumed. Nora stayed close to Dominic, not out of dependence, he noticed, but out of pragmatism. She was navigating an unfamiliar social terrain, and she was doing it efficiently. She spoke when spoken to, deflected intrusive questions with the smooth ease of someone who had been underestimated in rooms like this before, and had learned how to make that work for her. Vivian came to them during the cocktail hour. She moved through the crowd with the particular grace of a woman who knew she was being watched on her wedding day. She stopped in front of them with a smile that was calibrated to the millimeter. "Dominic," she said, "I wasn't sure you'd come. You invited me." "I did." Her gaze moved to Nora. "And you brought someone." She said it lightly, in the tone of someone pretending not to be surprised. "I don't think I know you, Vane," Nora said. Vivian looked her over slowly. In the language of women at events like this one, it was not a compliment. "That dress is very interesting," she said. "Very lived in." Dominic started to speak, but Nora was already responding, and her voice was clear and unhurried. "It is," Nora said simply. "I've lived in it today." She paused. "Your gown is beautiful. I imagine it took a long time to put on." Vivian's smile stayed exactly where it was. "Are you the kind of person who makes comments like that?" "I'm the kind of person," Nora said, "who says what she actually means. She tilted her head slightly. "I think you asked a question with your comment. You wanted to know if I'd take it. I won't, but not because I'm trying to be difficult. Just because I'm too tired for that kind of game." The silence between them was very brief. Vivian looked at Dominic then, and in her eyes, for just a moment, there was something real. Not the practiced social expression, not the beautiful armor, just a person looking at a situation and wondering if they had thought it through correctly. "You look well, Dominic," she said finally. "I am," he said, And the thing was, standing there, he realized he meant it. Vivian moved back toward the rest of her evening. Nora looked down at the table. She let out a slow breath. "You didn't have to do that," Dominic said. "I know." A pause. "But she was being unkind, and I've spent 8 months being gracious about unkind things because I needed something from the people doing them. Tonight, I don't need anything from her." She looked up at him. "Is that wrong?" "No," he said. "That's not wrong at all." He was looking at her face when it happened. An older man in a charcoal suit was making his way through the crowd. He was perhaps 70, with the kind of quiet authority that people develop over decades of being right about things. He had been a mentor to Dominic years ago. Bernard Fitch, one of the most respected names in urban development, a man who had advised city governments and private foundations from Boston to Atlanta. He stopped when he saw Dominic. "I didn't expect to find you here," Bernard said, shaking his hand with genuine warmth. "It was a complicated RSVP," Dominic said. Bernard laughed. Then his eyes moved to Nora, and the laugh faded. Not in an unfriendly way, more the way a man's face changes when he sees something he wasn't expecting to see, when a memory comes back to him with more force than he'd anticipated. He stood very still. Nora noticed. "Is something wrong?" Bernard didn't answer immediately. He was looking at the small crescent scar at the edge of her left eyebrow, and his expression was the expression of a man looking at a bridge between the past and the present. "Forgive me," he said slowly. "I don't mean to stare, it's only that." He stopped. "I knew your face many years ago, but it wasn't your face." Nora frowned. "I'm sorry." Bernard looked at Dominic. "Do you know who this is?" "Her name is Nora Vane," Dominic said. Bernard shook his head slightly. "The scar," he said, his voice lower now. "She got that when she was 5 years old. Fell off a chair in the kitchen. Her mother told me that story." Nora went still. "What's your mother's moved through?" Nora's face. "She died," Nora said, "when I was 12. Her name?" Bernard said again quietly. "Please." Nora looked at him for a long time. "Helen Vane," she said. "Her name was Helen." Bernard closed his eyes for one moment. When he opened them, they were wet. "Helen's daughter," he said. The words came out carefully, the way you carry something fragile across a room. "I have been looking for Helen's daughter for 18 years. Nora's hand found Dominic's arm without seeming to realize it. "You knew my mother?" she said. "I worked with her for 6 years, Bernard said. "She was the director of the Vane Housing Initiative before it was defunded. Before the fire at the archive building took everything she had documented." He stopped. "After she died, we tried to trace her family, but the records were gone. You were in the foster system by then. We couldn't find you." He shook his head. "She spent 12 years building something that she intended to leave to you, a foundation, endowed, self-sustaining." Nora shook her head slowly. "That's not possible." "She told me about you constantly," Bernard said. "She said you were the reason she did the work, that everything she built was for you." His voice broke very slightly at the end. "Child, you have been the beneficiary of a dormant foundation for 18 years. It's been waiting because we couldn't find you. No one knew where you went after the foster placements ended." Nora stood without speaking. The noise of the reception had become distant and irrelevant. Dominic could feel her hand on his arm. He put his hand over hers, steady and quiet, while she absorbed what she was hearing. "The work your mother did," Bernard said. "The policy frameworks she wrote. 3 cities are using them right now. They just don't know her name." He looked at her. "I would like to change that." Nora's composure, which had held through everything, came apart very gently and very quietly. No dramatic collapse. Just tears that moved down her face the way grief does when it finally gets permission. She turned toward Dominic without thinking about it, and Dominic put his arm around her shoulders, and she let him. She stood there for a moment, with her forehead almost against his jacket, and tried to remember how to breathe. Dominic said nothing. He just held her there, solid and present, while the music played in the background and the other guests moved around them with their champagne and their jewelry and their careful small talk. When she straightened up, her eyes were red and her face was open in a way that it hadn't been all evening. "She didn't forget me," Nora said. "No," Bernard said. "She never forgot you for a single day." What happened next moved quickly and in ways that the other guests would talk about for a long time afterward. Bernard Fitch, who was the kind of man that rooms listened to when he spoke, asked the band to stop for a moment. He took the microphone with the ease of a man who had addressed many rooms in his life and knew how to make them quiet. He spoke about Helen Vane. He spoke about the work she had done and the way she had done it, quietly, methodically, without credit or recognition, in the decades before anyone talked about housing justice in the language the news now used every day. He spoke about the foundation she had built and the daughter she had built it for, and the 18 years that had passed while that daughter had been living, without the one thing her mother had been certain she would never be without. He spoke about the night, this night, and the particular way that things sometimes arrive exactly when they are supposed to. And then he turned toward Nora and said simply, "She was proud of you before you had done a single thing. She told me so. I believe she would be proud of you now." The room was very quiet. Dominic began to clap. The sound started slowly, and then it spread, the way warmth spreads when the temperature finally changes, until the whole room was standing. Nora stood at the center of it and didn't smile the way a person smiles when they want to perform happiness for a crowd. She smiled the way a person smiles when something they stop believing in turns out to have been true after all. Across the room, Vivian watched from beside her new husband. She watched Dominic stand close to Nora, his hand at the small of her back, talking to her the way he used to talk to Vivian, focused and particular, as if the rest of the room was just weather. Later, Dominic would think that he didn't decide anything that night. He didn't reach any conclusions. He simply stood next to Nora Vane in the middle of a room that had dismissed her on sight and watched her receive her mother's life's work. And somewhere in the middle of that, he noticed that for the first time, in a long time, he wasn't thinking about the past at all. He was just there, present, in that room, with her. The dress she had worn was still worn at the shoulder seam. He had quietly arranged, through the hotel concierge, for a stylist to bring something from a boutique 4 blocks away. A deep green silk that had been in the window, which he'd noticed when the car pulled up and had thought, for a reason he couldn't have explained, of her. She didn't know it was from him until the stylist set the bag down, and he was the only person in the hall who looked away when she opened it. When she came back into the room, the green was exactly right. The silk moved when she walked. Bernard held out his hand, and someone took a photograph that would later appear in a profile of the Vane Foundation's relaunch. Nora standing straight, one hand in Bernard's, with the kind of expression that meant she had decided to stop being surprised by her own life. Dominic met her halfway across the room. She looked at him for a moment. "The dress was you. It wasn't a question. I passed the boutique on the way in," he said. The color seemed right. She held his gaze. "Why did you come out here tonight?" "Really?" He thought about the honest answer. "I came out here," he said, "because I wanted to prove something to someone I used to love." He looked at her. "And then I sat down next to you. And about 4 minutes later, I forgot what I was trying to prove." Then she took his arm, and they walked back into the room together, and the night, which had started as a reckoning, became something else entirely. Months later, Dominic would think about the concrete wall outside the Belmore Hotel. He would think about the monogrammed shortbread. He would think about the sound of her voice when she said, "I'm not a charity case," and how he had known immediately that she was right. The Vane Foundation reopened under Nora's directorship the following spring. She took her mother's policy work and built on it the way you build on a foundation that was always meant to hold something larger than what was originally imagined. 3 cities became 5, then 9. He was there the morning of the opening. He stood in the back and watched her speak to a room of city officials and community organizers and 2 former mayors, and she spoke the way she had spoken on the concrete wall, directly, without performance, as if the most important thing was that the words land correctly. He loved her by then, quietly and without ceremony, the way you love something you never expected to find and would not have known to look for. She looked up once during the speech, found him in the back of the room, and gave him the same small nod she had given him on the wall. Private. Certain. He nodded back. That was enough.